There are a surprising number of ways to be mentally unfit. Many varied and different mental disabilities, delusions, be they medical or self-taught, and varying degrees of physical and mental illness can work together to generate all kinds of traits, so to speak, that lead to different outcomes and behaviors. These traits and individuals are not always simple to categorize or indeed evaluate, but there is one thing that is concrete and indisputable: the outcomes. Anyone who has amassed or controls billions of dollars in personal wealth is guaranteed to be mentally ill, or unfit, if you will. So mentally unfit, in fact, that they represent a danger to humanity. And I plan to lay out the arguments here as to why that is universally the case. Let us break this down into individual justifications for the outcome of having more than $1 billion in personal wealth. Let me make one thing clear first. This is not a general attack on the majority of wealthy, single or double-digit millionaires, for example, or many small or medium business owners. You don't necessarily need to be mentally ill to have amassed wealth, but at some point in the accumulation process, it simply becomes a requirement to self-justify any further accumulation. So let us get back to the traits that are needed to self-justify such exorbitant wealth, either as an individual extreme or as a combination of traits. Firstly, overall, lacking empathy. It is generally accepted that lacking empathy is a mental deficiency. No one who displays an extreme lack of empathy should be in any position to impact the lives of others through their direct decisions. This is almost universally accepted. Delusions of having earned it. As nebulous as the concept of earned is, even those with average intelligence, if sane, should start having doubts that they personally earned their entire excessive wealth, independent of the collaboration and efforts of others, after the first billion. You may as well say that the aristocrats of old earned all of their accumulated wealth by exploiting their social systems of the time, and that their wealth is not generated off of the backs of the peasants. This delusion only increases with wealth accumulation and inequality. Delusion of exceptionalism. Simple racism is too easy, when one can look down on everyone equally, whether it is their blood or genes or something else. Something about them is simply better than everyone else, regardless of race. The right to rule justification literally requires a distorted view of the worth of the general population, and is just as deluded as the divine right of old. This delusion also only increases with increased power and wealth. Excessive greed. When is enough enough? Obviously, never. At some point, this trait must be considered compulsive and therefore destructive. Power hungry. Another version of greed, similar to other versions of narcissism. At some point, it must be considered a personality disorder. These are but the most obvious candidates. So which one is it? Who knows? And who cares? The only reason I picked $1 billion is because, after this amount, there can be no doubt that some combination of these deplorable justifications must be present to such a ridiculous degree that the individual must be considered a danger and risk to society at large. No one needs that amount of personal wealth to achieve anything even remotely considered to be a goal associated with a positive personality or character trait, and anyone claiming as such is just looking for an excuse to justify these unhealthy compulsions. It is back to aristocracy we go, it seems, where the peasants, I mean workers and small business owners, must pray that their economic masters are wise, and on occasion magnanimously allow us the fruits of their labor. Maintaining the economic social system, the price of progress. These are the things that society always has to pay for. Who exactly are we paying? Just to put this into perspective, because even I have difficulty fathoming what $1 billion actually means in real terms. $1 billion, or 1,000 million in US terms, would get you 5,000 $200,000 homes. Or, to put it another way, over 33,000 $30,000 cars. Does that not sound like much? Let us multiply that by only 100. Sounds small until you multiply 1 billion by it. The approximate wealth of the current richest people. Now, 100 billion gets you 500,000 $200,000 homes, or over 3 million $30,000 cars. So, a quick search seems to indicate that all billionaires together in the US alone have 4.48 trillion, approximately. Let's be generous and say only half of this amount is over the 1 billion per billionaire. That still leaves 2.24 trillion, just as a rough example here. So how much is that per 123 million households, rounded in the USA? That comes to just over 18,000 per household. Not an insubstantial amount for most of us. So for billionaires to be able to justify having their billions at all, they need to be either self-deluded, sick, extreme narcissist or psychopathic, to name only 2 possible illnesses, or stupid, or a combination thereof. Great. None of these traits are good for the rest of us, considering how much power they wield. Luckily, they give themselves away easily enough. Excessive wealth and power accumulation. It is like a compulsion, after all. They literally cannot help themselves. So they are easy to identify. We just need to have the gumption to act when they show themselves and not to delude ourselves that they think just like the rest of us. Because, if they did, they would not have gotten into the position in the first place. No one ever said that the psychologically sick individually cannot act sane enough most of the time to mostly pass as a functioning individual. As for the billionaire fanboys who will immediately jump to their defense, these individuals also conveniently out themselves as having some type of combination of these undesirable traits listed above, which are needed for their justifications. Luckily, for the most of us do not think like them, otherwise society would not function at all. Not all mentally unfit people are billionaires, or even rich, but all billionaires are, by the result of even being a billionaire, showing themselves to be mentally unfit. All the best and take care.